Imagine you are walking through a dark alleyway at night. You can picture the shadows, the sound of your hurried footsteps. Now, imagine a shrouded, ominous figure in the distance watching you. Your heart starts to race. Your senses go on alert. You know that this figure wants to harm you. They creep closer and closer, and your heart beats faster and faster until nothing. Imagine that you can't visualize any of it. No shadows and no unsettling sounds or figures. Your mind is black. Try to picture and feel that fear without being able to see that dark alley in your mind. Would that fear feel as intense without the mental imagery to fuel it? This is the reality for individuals with aphantasia, as these individuals are unable to form mental images in their brain. But does this lack of mental imagery inhibit one's ability to feel a physiological fear response to varying stimuli? Researchers Marcus Wicken, Rebecca Kiao, and Joel Pearson from the University of New South Wales School of Psychology conducted a study to investigate the critical role of mental imagery in the experiencing of human emotion. In this study, they aimed to answer the question, does visual mental imagery amplify emotional responses, particularly fear, and how does its absence in individuals with aphantasia affect their emotional reactions to imagined scenarios? The study aims to test the theory that mental imagery functions as an emotional amplifier by comparing the physiological fear responses of individuals with and without visual imagery when exposed to frightening imagined scenarios versus real visual stimuli. These researchers had multiple hypotheses. 1. That mental imagery would amplify emotional responses. 2. That individuals with aphantasia would show significantly lower physiological fear responses when asked to imagine frightening events. And 3. That aphantasia would not reduce emotional responses to real visual stimuli. When conducting the study, the researchers recruited 22 participants for the aphantasia group and 24 participants for the control group. The experiment was made up of two parts. During both of these parts, the participant's skin conductance level was recorded. The skin conductance measures the electrical conductivity of the skin, which increases with sweat gland activity. This means that as the participants experience heightened emotional arousal, experiencing emotions such as fear or stress, their skin conductance level would also show an increase. These two parts of the experiment were the imagery phase of the experiment and then the perception part of the experiment. In the imagery phase, the participants were asked to read fictitious fear-inducing scenarios presented phrase by phrase on a screen every 2 seconds. These stories were descriptive and designed to induce mental imagery. Skin conductance level was also recorded before and during the stories to track the participants' autonomic arousal. When reading these stories, aphantasic individuals showed significantly lower physiological fear responses than the non-aphantasic control group. In the perception phase of the experiment, both groups viewed 18 images from the International Affective Picture System, beginning with 5 neutral and then 13 frightening images, each displayed for 5 seconds. During this phase of the experiment, both the aphantasia group and the control group showed an increase in autonomic arousal, with little to no difference. These results suggest that the arousal response participants' experience was likely reliant on having intact mental imagery to be able to picture the scenario content. Where in the perception phase of the experiment, where participants were shown frightening images, the aphantasia group showed the same level of autonomic arousal as they did not need the visual mental imagery to amplify the physiological responses as they were already viewing the images themselves. In this study, both groups exhibited similar physiological reactions to real visual stimuli, indicating that aphantasic individuals are not inherently less emotional. Instead, their reduced fear response to imagined scenarios suggests that they lack the emotional amplification effect of mental imagery. This finding underlines the crucial role of mental imagery in enhancing emotional experiences. The findings of this research have profound implications in our understanding of emotion and mental imagery. The research suggests that the critical role of mental imagery in the shaping of human emotional responses suggests that individuals who lack this ability may experience emotions in a fundamentally different way. This has major clinical implications, particularly for mental health treatments. As if patients can't visualize mental imagery, then many therapeutic approaches and therapies will be significantly less effective. As there are many treatments that rely on the patient's ability to imagine specific imagery. Therapies such as imagery rescripting, imaginal exposure, and guided imagery therapy heavily rely on this process. These findings will allow psychologists to better adapt their therapeutic approaches to their clients. Additionally, aphantasia may inhibit intrusive thoughts in conditions such as PTSD or anxiety, as a lack of mental imagery would inhibit the brain's ability to picture frightening or stressful events. If aphantasic individuals do not experience mental imagery, they might therefore be less vulnerable to these conditions. It may also mean that aphantasic patients with these disorders may experience or express atypical symptoms. Understanding the role of aphantasia in the presentation of these disorders would further allow for psychologists to make the correct and most accurate diagnosis for their patients. This research also suggests that while individuals with aphantasia may be protected against negative mental imagery, it may also reduce positive mental imagery. This means that these individuals may be more prone to feelings of low mood, hopelessness, or lack of motivation, as visualizing positive future events plays a role in optimism and protection against depression. Though the researchers do acknowledge that this experiment only tested the physiological fear response, and that it is possible that other emotions might be less amplified by mental imagery. Further research will need to be completed to better understand the extent to which aphantasia alters emotional experience and the presentation of one's psychological diagnosis.